Imagine being able to live an extra 15 years thanks to scientific advancements. That's exactly what biotech has made possible in the past 50 years. Thanks to targeted therapies, the 5-year survival rate for chronic myeloid leukemia has more than doubled from 31% to 70% in just 20 years. None of these improvements would be possible without advancements in the biotech industry. By harnessing cellular and molecular processes, biotech is able to develop products that improve our lives. Modern biotech started in 1973 when 2 biochemists cloned the first animal DNA. 3 years later, the world's first genetic engineering company, Genentech, was formed with the goal of genetically modifying bacteria to produce human insulin. Fast forward 40 years, and the breakthroughs in the field are truly astounding. From DNA sequencing, CRISPR gene editing, and minimally invasive surgery techniques, the possibilities are endless. But with innovation comes money, controversy, and scrutiny. And at the heart of these issues are the industry's pricing practices. Got cancer? That'll cost you $42,000 per year on average, with some treatments going into the millions.
Do you think you've done anything wrong? On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
The business of biotech has made entrepreneurs and investors incredibly rich, but it's also faced its fair share of obstacles, including criticism from lawmakers and the public over its pricing practices and several cycles of both booms and busts. As we stand today, the biotech sector is facing its next big challenge. With new legislation looming, the industry's predatory pricing practices are under threat. The aftermath of COVID-19 has left the industry in a deep bear market, and funding for early-stage drug development is drying up. But is this the end of biotech's golden age? Let's find out. The biotech sector has gone through several bubbles in the past, starting with the genomics bubble of the late 1990s, which popped during the dot-com crash. The industry was reignited between 2012 and 2014 when several blockbuster drugs were approved. But what really brought investor attention back to the sector was Gilead's Sovaldi for the treatment of hepatitis C, a drug that was approved in 2013 and made a record-breaking $10 billion in its first year. A record that was later shattered by Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, which went from zero to $37 billion in sales in 2021. The next wave of momentum also came in 2013, alongside advances in immuno-oncology, the development of cancer treatments. Positive clinical data and commercial success for companies like Merck and Bristol Myers led to growing interest in other oncology companies. Between 2010 and 2019, the number of novel drugs approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration steadily increased, and oncology made up nearly 25% of the 378 approved. A friendly FDA and low interest rates made it much easier for biotech startups to raise money. In search of higher returns, investors were highly motivated to fund biotech startups and were attracted to the more speculative sectors. In 2011 and 2012, patents on several major drugs held by large pharmaceutical companies expired. To replenish their portfolios, Big Pharma went on a buying spree, paying large premiums to acquire promising new pharmaceuticals, helping boost returns in the sector. In 2017, Gilead paid $11.9 billion for Kite Pharma. In 2018, Celgene bought Juno Therapeutics for $9 billion. Both of these acquired companies were developing cancer treatments. Investors reaped the benefits as the SPDR S&P Biotech ETF, an exchange-traded fund that tracks the biotech industry's performance, rose 240% between 2012 and 2019, more than double the S&P 500's 100%. But it was what happened next that really helped investors bring the bag home. As we all know, the year 2020 brought a global pandemic that sent the entire financial market into a tailspin, including the biotech industry. But as the world adapted to the new reality, markets quickly rebounded and biotech climbed to new heights. Between 2012 and 2021, the SPDR S&P Biotech ETF rose nearly 700%, triple that of the S&P 500. Two major factors contributed to this rapid growth. The first was the record injection of capital into the economy from the Fed, which sent the prices of speculative assets, including crypto, tech, and biotech, soaring. The second was the success of mRNA-based COVID vaccines. Founded in 2010, Moderna went from a little-known company trying to develop drugs using a cutting-edge mRNA technique to one of the biggest success stories of the pandemic, with its stock rising over 2,000% within 2 years. This success led to a funding frenzy where investors were willing to fund just about anything in search for the next Moderna. 2020 to 2021 was arguably even crazier than the dot-com bubble. In 2020, there were 131 biotech IPOs, and the following year, there were 154, the highest ever. There were significantly more companies going public than at any other time in the past 20 years. Prices also reached eye-watering levels, with the average valuation of biotech IPOs in 2021 63% higher than in 2000. But as with any bubble, it was inevitable that a crash would come. And it did. The biotech industry had risen too high, too fast. Its peak was on February 5th, 2021, and over the next year, the industry lost nearly half its value. The Fed began raising interest rates, which drove up the cost of funding. Just as falling interest rates had made money easier to come by, rising interest rates did the opposite. This made it more difficult for startups to raise money, a serious problem for the biotech industry that relies heavily on investor funding for drug development. And the price tag for funding development is no small sum. It costs an average of $2.6 billion to develop a new medicine, and biotech companies often do not generate any revenue until their products hit the shelves. In a market downturn, large pharma companies are less likely to buy these companies, and in recent years, they have increasingly brought innovation and drug development in-house. This flips the traditional playbook of a biotech startup that uses this game plan. 1. Raise boatloads of capital. 2. Spend years developing a drug. 3. Go through several clinical trials to get FDA approval. 4. Go public in the process, or get acquired by a large pharma giant. Using their marketing strengths, large pharma would usually profit off an exclusive 20-year patent to sell these drugs before generic competitors could even enter the market. With rising rates and an uncertain market environment, biotech mergers and acquisitions quickly dried up. A few years ago, biotech startups could rely on pharma giants to swoop in and buy them out, but that's no longer the case. For now. Prior to the market collapse, the biotech industry was far outperforming the S&P 500, but after the crash, its 10-year returns are now in line with the S&P 500, erasing the lead biotech had over the broader market. While market factors impact all sorts of industries, investors should be worried about industry-specific problems, such as the lack of funding and M&A opportunities. The biotech industry has seen unprecedented growth in recent decades, but there's one key factor that has played a critical role in the development and approval of many life-saving drugs: the FDA's Accelerated Approval Program. Launched in 1992, this program has allowed for the early approval of drugs that treat serious conditions, such as HIV and cancer. There have been nearly 300 drugs approved through this program, with nearly half in the last 5 years. But as the number of drugs approved through this program has risen, so have concerns about safety and efficacy. Critics argue that the program has led to a glut of expensive, unproven medications, particularly for cancer. The program reached peak criticism in 2021 when the FDA approved the first Alzheimer's prescription in nearly 20 years. Instead of reversing Alzheimer's, one study showed that it only slowed the disease. A panel of experts urged the FDA to reject the drug, but still, it was approved anyways. This has sparked a heated debate, with some calling for stricter oversight and more rigorous testing for medicines approved through the program. In recent years, the FDA has taken a tougher stance on accelerated approvals and has even tried taking certain drugs off the market. But with drug makers often unwilling to cooperate, this presents a significant risk for biotech companies and investors. So the FDA is turning to Congress to ask for more power to remove these drugs. Currently, after a drug gets accelerated approval, companies must conduct confirmation studies to prove the benefits of the drug. But federal inspectors recently found that 40% of accelerated approvals had incomplete confirmation studies. While taking approved drugs off market is difficult, the FDA can slow down the pace of new approvals, and that's exactly what they're doing. Now, the industry must navigate a more uncertain future.
Now, you guys have said that the reason you increased this price so much after acquiring the drug was in order to do the research and development to develop a better version of Daraprim. I just got off the phone with an HIV doctor who told me they don't need a better version of this drug. What are you doing here?
As biotech continues to evolve, one thing remains certain. The cost of drugs continues to be a contentious issue. After a drug is approved, the company holds a 20-year patent before other companies can enter the market with cheaper generics. This essentially gives the company monopoly over the drug, with the power to charge ridiculous prices. Drug pricing has always been a topic of debate in American politics. In recent years, lawmakers have been putting pressure on the industry to lower prices, shining a spotlight on the sky-high costs of prescriptions. In the US, where government doesn't regulate drug pricing, the cost of prescription drugs can be 2 to 6 times higher than in other countries.
Did the drug start to work faster? Were there fewer side effects? How did you change the formula or production of Revlimid to justify this price increase?
As the industry faces mounting pressure to cut costs, healthcare execs are nervously watching to see how the situation will play out. In 2022, Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, which has 2 significant impacts on the pharmaceutical industry. First, Medicare will have more power to negotiate prices on certain drugs. Second, buyers will be able to get rebates on drugs that rise at a higher pace than inflation. Drug makers are fighting back, and for years, the pharma industry has successfully fended off legislation on drug pricing. The details are still being finalized, and initial price changes won't occur until at least 2026. Jefferies investment banking analysts estimate that the legislation could reduce pharmaceutical companies' sales by $40 billion through 2032. The legislation could also slow the pace of acquisitions. Healthcare execs are hesitant to invest in new drugs or acquire companies if they don't know how much they could make in the following years. Nina Kjelsen, a partner at venture capital firm Canaan, says the industry has always cried wolf. And it's always the same arguments, like if you change anything about this piece of legislation, it's going to decimate the industry. That isn't to say the growth of biotech is over. It simply means that investing in biotech may not be as easy as it was in the past decade, some even seeing it as a temporary lull. Analyst Christopher Raymond of Piper Sandler said the smart money isn't abandoning the sector, but they are taking a harder look at the companies they're willing to back. Ultimately, if you're a good company with good science, with a good business model, you'll make it through, according to the chief executive of Loncar Investments. Are we in the dip before biotech makes a historic run? Stick around and hit that subscribe button to find out. If you enjoyed this content, subscribe to our free 4 times weekly newsletter that covers investing trends, news, and analysis. It's called The Average Joe, and it'll help you become a better investor. Concise, informative, and only takes 5 minutes to read. Subscribe for free using the link in our description, or head over to readthejoe.com. Thanks for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Best of Investing.